Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our panel for being here today on this very important issue. I represent the 2nd District of North Carolina, and in our district, we have 70,000 veterans, and I'm very proud to represent them. Many of them are returning home from Afghanistan, and certainly have come home from Iraq. And living in our communities with PTSD, and I know that's something that you're all aware of. I understand that new path-breaking technologies are emerging in treating veterans with PTSD, specifically the use of magnetic resonance therapy. Do you know, and this, Dr. Neal, this is a question for you. Do you know if the Department of Veterans Affairs has looked into any of these new technologies, in particular into the magnetic resonance therapy treatment?
Thanks, Mrs. Ellmers. No, I do not know that.
Okay. There again, getting into the issue of how we need to move forward on many of these treatments, such as PTSD. In the, there's broad agreement that the present system that we have with clinical trials is ineffective and costly. There was an expert that participated in the PCAS report that estimated a more efficient clinical trial system could cut the costs in half across the industry. Dr. Neal, do you have any thoughts on what we can do to make trials more efficient and less expensive? And what would this mean to the R&D budgets across the industry?
Thank you again. First of all, I'll just say that it would have a huge impact because more than 40% of industrial R&D expenditure is in the area of clinical trials. And one of the reasons that we formed Transcelerate Biomedical as an industry collaboration was to address clinical trials inefficiency. And there, we looked at this and said, these are areas where we do not have and cannot really realize any competitive advantage, and we're all spending the same money over and over again to basically reconstruct a clinical trials infrastructure every time. We're all using the same investigators, we're all training the investigators, and then we're not recognizing each other's training. We all have our own website to communicate with it, and so on and so forth. And so we took that on, and the early results are very promising as a way to be able to increase a lot of efficiency, reduce the burden on clinical investigators, and reduce the cost. I think there are a lot of other great examples, the cystic fibrosis example being one of them with their clinical trials network, where specific disease-specific networks can be created so you become plug and play by being able to start these trials very quickly. And this new lung cancer master protocol, I think, is a great innovation in that direction. So taken all together, I believe there's an enormous amount of efficiency on the table. There are a lot of things in my testimony that I specifically recommended around IRBs, safety monitoring boards, clinical trial networks, and new innovative approaches to this, like, again, in your state at the Duke Clinical Research Institute, their collaboration with the NIH, with the collaboratory. So they're exploring ways to be able to randomize using electronic health records and test different therapies. I think we need to explore all of that, and there's no doubt that we will have the greatest impact on accelerating these cures to patients, reducing costs, and making the whole system work better if we can take that on. And I think Congress could do a lot here.
Thank you, Dr. Neal. Let me see, time, about a minute left. Dr. Tunis, I have a question too, and it gets back to the issue that has been asked a number of times on, how much of the patient involvement is taken into account, especially in the FDA, when it comes to moving forward in an accelerated fashion. How does the FDA view the patient input on some of these issues?
Certainly aware that there's a couple of focused initiatives going on at the FDA that are really trying to enhance the degree to which patient perspectives are taken into account. There's the patient-focused drug development that I believe came out of the FDAMA and FDASIA was okay. And then in the Center for Devices, there's a medical device innovation collaborative that's very much focusing on patient perspectives on benefit risk, very much with the notion that, one of the potential delays in product development is what level of concern or what willingness patients have to tolerate risk, and whether the regulators and the regulators' perspective on that is different from the patients. And I think there's a view that the patients are probably, or may be in many cases, willing to tolerate more risk, particularly in serious and life-threatening illnesses. So it seems to me, from my observations, that there's a lot of recognition that the patient perspective is important, and the difficulty is, capturing it both, individually and aggregately, and how do you make a regulatory process that might even have to be adjustable based on individual patient preferences for balancing benefits and risks. So the interest is there, but I think it's complicated.
It is complicated, and certainly liability plays into all of this as well. It looks to me
Ms.
you,
Ellmers,
you
yes,
really want
I
to
do.
comment on this.
I
would
do,
like
because Congress deserves a great deal of credit, and as the lawyer who understands drug law. 1906 drug law was created. It never mentioned, no law until FDASIA ever mentioned patient. It was assumed that laws could be created in order to enable a regulator to look at what the medical industry and the drug industry produced in some sort of paternalistic way for patients. Now I'm speaking on behalf of NORD, who represents 30 million Americans with rare diseases. And so we're so pleased that this Congress in FDASIA introduced the concept for the first time that the patient voice is meaningful, has a role in drug development. And that's why you had the patient-focused drug development, the structured benefit-risk ratio. The FDA said we can now impanel, the FDASIA law said, impanel patients in part of the FDA internal review team as special government employees. Tiffany House with Pompe disease did that for a drug for Pompe's. And the FDA reviewers later, when I talked to them, I said, what did you learn from having a patient for the first time as part of your internal review team? They said, we learned that for a patient with a relentlessly progressive, deteriorating disease, that for that patient to be stable was a huge win. So the role of the patient is now emergent, and it's due to this Congress. So I just couldn't avoid taking the time to say thank you.
Thank you to the panel, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we went over our time, but I really could not avoid hearing those thanks and appreciation words. So much of what we typically do not hear. So thank you.